Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world you are. My name is Christopher Patnoe, and I'm the EMEA head of accessibility for Google. Means I get to play in Africa, in the Middle East, and Europe, and try to understand the needs of the community and bring it back into Google so we can make our products and platforms better. And I'm so happy to be here with my dear friend Christine from Open Inclusion. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Christopher, and it's just a delight to be here. I'm Christine Hemphill. I'm the founder and managing director of Open Inclusion. We're a disability inclusive research organisation that works across design and innovation, and we particularly love working in the space we're going to be talking about today, which is the intersection of human needs and diverse human needs and emerging technologies, and how we can essentially leverage these emerging technologies to solve for unmet needs across the range of human diversity that exists today.
So we will be talking about AI, something you've heard about once or twice, probably in the last 25 minutes. But it's not going to be the Google guy talking about AI. What's actually really interesting is trying to understand what do we in the community really think? What do we expect from it? And how do we get to a future that has real meaning for us? And we do that through the deep inclusive research, which Christine has done with Open Inclusion. And we were so fortunate to host you in our Accessibility Discovery Center in London, where we share the research. So this is sort of the TLDR version of what was 90 minutes there. We're going to try to do in the next 13 minutes and 27 seconds. So let me stop talking and ask you the first question, which really is, how do disabled people's attitudes around AI differ from those who are not disabled? I mean, we heard you talk earlier today about some of the fears, but in your experience, what do people think?
It's a really interesting question, and we didn't know. And just to say, this research was funded as part of the Centre for Doctoral Training work on AI for digital media inclusion at the University of Surrey. And we had the opportunity to talk to 500 people through a survey, and then 17 experts on disability and AI, including people from Utah's university at the OCAD Centre, about the experience, expectations and attitudes to AI. Of the 500 people we did a survey with, 300 people weren't yet disabled, 200 people did identify as disabled. So we could look across that community difference, but also within those two communities to see how did attitudes vary between the two. And I'm sure it won't surprise anyone here to know people with disabilities are more concerned about AI, because anyone who's been watching for the last 20 years has seen many emerging technologies go from emerging to mainstream technologies, and people with disabilities being left behind because they weren't engaged early enough and fully enough in the design and the innovation and the application of different solutions. So the short form is, yes, disabled people on average are more pessimistic about AI and how it's going to be applied. Both currently, it is being applied, and in the future, it may be applied. And not surprisingly, also the future, both for disabled and non-disabled people are more pessimistic than the current. And if you think about the power and the potential of AI as a really useful solution that humans could apply to solve the unmet needs that we have today in society, the fact that both communities are more pessimistic to the future shows that there is a problem here. We're not designing with people in mind. We're not designing solutions that people want in the way that they want them. And I think this shows a much broader mainstream opportunity, but the gap is bigger for disabled people. And they are more pessimistic about the future than they are, and the difference between non-disabled and disabled is greater in the future attitudes than it is in the current, which means they're more worried about more exclusion that will come. And that's something that I'm a natural-born optimist, and I look at that as a huge opportunity for us here to go out and address, as opposed to just something to put our heads in our hands and go, dang, what can we do with that? We can do a lot, and this is the moment at which we need to be doing that.
I think some of the things that people forget about AI is that this is not something that's new. We've been talking about these new large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini over the past couple of years, but we've had AI and accessibility since, at Google at least, since 2009, when we did our first automatic speech captions in YouTube. And we're still doing it because you're never going to be perfect. But that journey of AI is always so important. But we need to understand where we're coming from to understand where we need to go in the future. So in that process of moving to the future, especially now when there's so much innovation, things are going faster and faster and faster. What can we do to make sure that we can limit the risks and make the future that we really deserve and not the future that we may be given?
I think it's a really important point. So, there are risks in AI, and we are seeing them, and whether you're listening to Jutta or to Susan Scott Parker or many other, really well-informed speakers here, we're hearing of the risks. There's also many benefits. So if you think about the risks, some of the specific use cases we looked at for the research we did biometrics, voice user interfaces, and adapted digital media content, so personalisation of digital media content. And biometrics, is quite well known, but that it's quite well embedded, but that has the highest positivity of the benefits of it. But there's also the risks that disabled people feel there. For example, 59% of people with disabilities felt that the technology, when it makes a mistake, it'll be really hard to know who's responsible for what went wrong. That's 15% higher than non-disabled people. So that cost of biometrics failing people and then not having anyone responsible for that, that is a consequence of these technologies. That's a very real consequence that might limit people's access to banking or government services or ability to apply for a job. We had one of the case studies there, actually it was shared by Susan, which was about someone applying for a job at Deliveroo, and the biometrics, which was a facial biometric, failed them. And in fact, I somewhere have the quote from her, which was, essentially that, if there's a human involved in the loop, you might find a human that's not biased, but an algorithm that's designed to be biased will never undesign itself. So, just that recognition of when you make a mistake, the consequence is locked in, as opposed to, humans are biased as well, let's recognise that, but that bias is not locked in and is able to be moved more easily. So the risks in different areas are very specific to each use case, and we need to delve into it by use case. This does show the complexity of AI because it's not a technology, a thing, it's an enablement of many technologies. And the fact that it sits underneath the surface of the user interface, so that it's just embedded in the way that the decisions are made, predictions are made, solutions are informed, we need to be very clear as to what are the consequences of that. And in fact, your colleague Sarah Basson spoke beautifully to that in the research of consequence scanning, and really considering consequences not as a generic set of consequences, but specific to different personal characteristics, different contexts, different ways it might land in people's lives, and then determining how appropriate that technology might be within that solution set. So making decisions with consequence in mind. Of course, to have consequence in mind, you need to engage with people who understand consequences and who understand that with the lived experience, and also professional and personal experience actually on both sides, to be able to see the what if. What if this is applied in a place where it comes out with a solution that won't be correct or accurate, or might bias in a particular way. So right at the intent stage, we need people involved with a really broad range of experiences so that we can identify consequences, and all the way through the design of the solution, be mitigating them and managing them and setting up the measures so that as soon as it's being deployed, whether ideally in a pilot stage and being tested before it just gets thrown out into society broad scale, that we can be looking for any unintentional consequences that go with that, and that has been informed by people with a very broad range of experiences. So risk management to me really comes right from the beginning, from setting the intent of the usage of AI within a technology, and then managing that all the way through the data set, understanding how data may or may not inform the solution accurately or inaccurately, and even accurately, There's, I think, 3 problems in data sets. One of them is the data sets that we have today miss a lot of data about people with marginalised experiences, specifically including disability. As a researcher, I know how much research is done that excludes people with disabilities. That's what's generated the data sets we have today, and therefore there's just a great big exclusion footprint sitting through most of society's data today. Secondly, if we've captured data which includes people with disabilities experiences, for example, usage of various assets, or whether it's our usage of roads or our usage of transport or our usage of a technology, we won't necessarily have disability correlation. We won't know whose experience is informed by what personal characteristics, to be able to understand the differential experience between people, and therefore to recognise any bias that might be sitting within it or in the outcomes. And then thirdly, of course, we might have captured information about people with disabilities, and we might have accurately correlated it, and we might have accurately reflected the bias that sits within the reality of our society today. So there's these kind of 3 layers of challenges in data today: the gap in the data, the correlation gap in the data, and the reality of reflecting a past into the future that we may not wish to take forward without challenging it on the way.
And the challenging of these biases is really difficult, because there's so many people who are doing this work in terms of creating new models and creating new applications and experiences. It's the people who are trying to drive fast and break things are the ones that are going to create the situations like what Susan Scott Parker said when this man was trying to do Deliveroo. He would trying to do a biometric authentication and say no face, no face, no face. Well, he has a face, but the biases of the application expected it to look heteronormatively. 2 eyes in a particular place, a nose and a mouth in a particular place, and if you don't have this, the mesh doesn't match. This is an incorrect bias, but these things are hard to solve, even when you are intentional. When you're not intentional, then the challenge becomes greater, because you don't even know what question to ask, or even is there a question at all. So given the time we have, I have one last question for you. How do we need to apply and modify inclusive design principles to make it possible to build the tools that we deserve, and not the tools that we may get if we don't have this intention?
The first thing is we all need to get involved. And I think AI can feel intimidating, and AI can feel very technical. It's not. It's human solving human problems. This is a space we all need to get involved in, and it is, there's a quote which is, technology is too important to be left to the technologists. That is the case here. So please, everybody, start to get curious, really question, ask and learn. This is coming to us, and we need to be involved in the making of that solution. And the move fast and break things, and the way in which design is done today, particularly tech design, is going to fail our society. And this is different to past technologies. This is different to interface design, which is where we've looked at, mobile, the move to mobile, or the move to, internet enablement. These trends that we have had in the past will not be the same as this one. The reason is this one sits below the surface. So we need to be much more actively involved. We need much greater transparency as to where is AI being applied, why and how, and who was involved in the making of it, to be really conscious of who is responsible for the negative outcomes. When that gentleman can't get a job, who can, how do they even know that that is why, and how do they get someone solving that? So we need a much greater transparency, working in the open. We need to learn from each other. We can't move fast enough. This is moving so quickly. No single person can be responsible for trying to keep up with this, but communities can. And that's why I think this is such an important conversation for here, and the Zero Project community, both in person and online here. as a community, we can all get actively involved and we can all learn in our own spaces and share across the community. And I think we need to make spaces for that to happen so that we can really conscientiously build forward together. We need to also monitor. We need to monitor the outcomes, because that is the best way to make sure that this is working. And of course, we need to manage the outcomes. So whether it's regulation, laws, guidelines, practices, there are so many ways to manage outcomes. And that way we can scalably solve for some of these issues that are coming up, but also find the opportunity for these technologies to really be lent into and solve for some of the challenging unmet needs we've got today, that they could very appropriately be applied to, such as, you know, enabling assistive technology to be far more personalised to individuals' needs.
And I think, given that we're so late on time, the most important thing is that this is something that we do together. It's not up to them, it's up to us. The computer science is hard. The people part is harder. It's easy to solve computers. People are challenging. People's needs are robust and nuanced. So we all have to be involved. We all have to do this together. Thank you.
Can I just also, for one last moment, say, if anyone would, our bit of togetherness and transparency, we will be releasing the report. We just link into Open Inclusion's LinkedIn page or my own, and it'll be released in the next couple of days. We'll be putting it online, including the 90-minute version of this, if anyone would like to see the longer version. Thank you.
Thank you.